Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Sports Junkies. We're back. We're ready to go. I've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. Joined by my good friend and usual suspect, Ben Baker. Ben, good to have you as usual.
Hello, folks.
And we're joined on the phone by a retro vintage sports junkie, Ben. Way back from our days at San Francisco State on the radio. Mike Mitchell is with us. Hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me today.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, we figured we'd start. The NFL draft is coming up, guys, and which means, we thought we'd start by talking about football today with the Niners and the Raiders preparing for the draft, making a lot of off-season moves. And now let's do a quick review of the Raiders last season. We'll start with the Raiders, go with the Niners. And the Raiders started 8-8, missed out on the playoffs on the last day of the season. They lost to San Diego in Week 17 to give Denver the division. And Ben, why don't you tell us real quickly what the rankings were like for the Raiders this past season?
Well, they just did not quite make the playoffs. It was all about Tim Tebow that season. And,
yeah, it was.
They almost snuck in, but just didn't quite. The Raiders were 9th in offense, not too bad, but 29th in defense. So certainly I think that's their biggest hole in the team. That's what they need to work on.
Right, and it was all around defense too, Ben. I mean, you look at 29th in points allowed, 27th in rushing yards per game given up, 27th in passing yards given up. So it looks pretty, I would say, Mike, that it looks pretty straightforward what you think the Raiders need to focus on in the offseason.
Straightforward, I don't know about that. I think the Raiders are just a team that has no stability at this point. They have no direction whatsoever at the head coaching spot. And going into the draft, I think that they're really going to have to rely on the draft right now with their cap situation to improve this football team. I mean, they've cut a bunch of their regulars on defense, including Wembley, who was probably their best defensive player last year. I think the draft is really important for Oakland in the upcoming future because of the money situation. And right now, they need to get a head coach in there that can establish some type of stability within this organization, because right now I don't think anything about this organization is straightforward on how they need to improve whatsoever. It's just a mess right now in Oakland. And if you're a Raiders fan, you have to think that you're starting from square one again.
Right. Well, yeah, and go ahead, Ben. Look like you want to say something there.
It's going to be a tough draft for them too, because they don't have a pick in the first two rounds. Their first one comes around the 100th overall pick at the end of the third.
Right, they get the compensation pick at the end of round 3, and then they don't have another pick till round 4. But let me ask you this, Ben. We just mentioned that they were 9th in offense, but 29th in defense. Obviously, you would think conventional wisdom would say, okay, you got to focus on defense in the draft. But now they've lost their starting running back. Michael Bush is signed elsewhere. What could that possibly do to the Raiders' offseason plans? Or draft plans.
Maybe they can just pray that McFadden can stay healthy for a full season. But other than that, yeah, I mean, maybe take a running back with that third pick. Maybe make a trade. They got to have something that they can trade because, first pick coming in at 100th. Right. I think a lot of teams, that player doesn't even make the roster at the start of the season. Right.
Well, and that's a good point in terms of trade. Mike, do you see the Raiders possibly trading up to get more draft picks to bring more people in?
I don't think anything's an option right now for the Oakland Raiders. They looked like a playoff team midway through the year last year, and the McFadden injury really hurt. But I mean, you look at this team, and I think 2012 is going to be a lost season until they can find themselves some type of stability financially and within the head coach, within the organization. You mentioned, Ben, about them not having a first or second round pick. Where do the Raiders go right now? They have an aging quarterback. They have an injury-prone running back, it's looking like. And the problem with the Raiders last year was the simple fact that even by Raiders standards, they committed way too many penalties. The biggest thing about the 2011 Raiders were they set a record for being the most penalized team in NFL history. That's not something that you're proud about or smiling about within the organization. This team, they looked like a playoff team midway through the year last year, but the division was winnable until Peyton Manning became a Bronco. Now I think the Raiders need to start thinking about 2013 and beyond. I think 2012 is going to be a lost season, to tell you the truth, for the Raiders and their fans.
Could be along with Peyton Manning in the division. It could be along, if he's assuming, again, you can't assume this is Peyton Manning anymore, assuming he stays healthy, it could be a long year for everybody else in that division except Denver.
Yeah.
Although
sorry,
San Diego's usually, somewhat strong, but they were a little off last year.
I think Mitch brings up a great point. With San Diego in the division not playing as well as they certainly could have last year, and then bringing Peyton Manning into the division. Talk about Peyton Manning going against the 29th defensive team with the most penalties. I think the Raiders need to accept that they need to spend at least 1 year on rebuilding.
Right. Oh, and to help the defense, by the way, do you see this as being an impactful move, Mike, the fact that the Raiders have signed quarterback Shawnte Spencer over from the Niners?
Do I think that's an impactful move? Absolutely not. Shawnte Spencer, I have no comment.
Right, yeah.
Shawnte Spencer, lucky to even be in the league at this point. So to have a job, Shawnte Spencer's got to be counting his blessings.
Okay, well, before we go across the bay to San Francisco, let me ask you real quick, Ben, of the moves that we see that the Raiders have made so far, which one do you think, which move do you think is the biggest, is the best move so far, either, in terms of being a good move or a bad move? What move do you think will make the most difference, if any move right now?
I think maybe that they let Jason Campbell go. They need to admit that wasn't working, and they need to actually go out and land a good quarterback.
Well, they have Carson Palmer.
Yeah, but I don't know. They've got holes all over the place, and I don't think there's anything that really jumps out as like a franchise-saving move or anything close to that.
Okay, well, I think the big loss right now, at least offensively, is definitely losing Michael Bush, because especially with McFadden's injury history, like you were saying, can he stay healthy? You're going to need a solid running back in there, and Bush got the job done. He did a good job for them. So for him signing elsewhere, there's a big hole now on that side of the ball for the Raiders. All right, let's switch teams here. We'll drive across the Bay Bridge and head over to the 49ers. Niners last year, of course, winning the NFC West, almost a Cinderella season, came very close, going 13-3. You guys are going to hate me for bringing this up, but they did lose the NFC Championship game to the eventual Super Bowl champions, the New York Giants. Niners have been making some moves, including lately. Now, we all knew going into the offseason that the big weakness especially was the offense, and especially the wide receiver core. Because the wide receiver, you look at the NFC Championship game, one reception by wide receiver in that game. All the other passes were like Vernon Davis and everybody else. One reception by a wide receiver in the NFC Championship game, and they lost that game. So let's talk about the offense first for a second. Ben, how did they rank offensively in 2012?
Well, the Niners in 2011.
Jumped ahead of myself.
Go back to my notes here. Here they are. Sorry. Thanks, Thomas. 26th in offense. So they were practically the Raiders of offense. And they were fourth in defense. Now, I think that things were really starting to come together by the end of the season in offense. And as I'm sure we'll talk in a second, they addressed that with some of their free agent signings. And the defense, it's hard to believe they're as low as fourth. They are just almost, the best defense in the league. Incredible.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, Mitch, I know you're a huge 49er fan, as we all are. Let me ask you, you look at this offense, and, Ben mentioned 26th overall, 8th in rushing, 29th in passing. The passing game has been an issue for the 49ers for years. How frustrating was it to watch this offense in 2011, knowing how good the rest of the team was?
I don't know which was worse, watching the San Francisco Giants swing the bats in 2011 or watching the 49ers. Which offense was worse? Really think about it. You really have to sit and ponder it. One reception in an NFC Championship game. They had Alex Smith was throwing at guys off the practice squad by the end of the year. Braylon Edwards didn't work out. Michael Crabtree, I just, I hope that Crabtree can somehow emerge. He showed signs last year of emergence, but then he showed signs, major setbacks come the postseason. He just seems like a guy to me that just doesn't know how to get open consistently. He doesn't have glaring speed. He looks like he was a very physical wide receiver in college, but it just seems to me that Michael has a problem running routes and getting open on a consistent basis. Last year, towards the end of the season and through the playoffs, Vernon Davis was the biggest threat the 49ers had offensively. And I think the real key to the 49ers and their struggles on offense last year was the fact of the matter that Frank Gore began to slow down towards the end of the year. And this is what really concerns me, because I've talked to you about it before, Tom, about trying to find an identity offensively.
Right.
And the 49ers are one of those teams that want to pound the football. Frank Gore was their core last year. But Gore began to take a beating towards the end of the year. I think he carried the ball 282 times last year. He looked slow and just physically beat down towards the end of the year. And I think it really affected them in the way they called plays late in that game, in the NFC title game. If you look back, the last 3 drives of that game were just pass, pass, pass. They went away from their identity. And, I think the key to this offense this year coming up, even though they've made improvements to the wide receiver position, is going to be the health of Frank Gore. He's not getting any younger. The lifespan of a running back in the NFL is not that long. He's a big question mark. I think the 49ers need to be watching him, and they just extended his contract. I think they need to be very worried about Frank Gore right now.
Well,
That's the way I look
think,
at
Ben,
the 49ers.
Mike makes a very good point, because we're all focused on the wide receiver. We're all focused on the passing game. And the running game, in terms of identity, the Niners have at least tried to be a running team for years. Ever since they've had Frank Gore, we're going to run it. We're going to give the ball to Gore. It's gotten frustrating sometimes. We've all talked about it. 3rd and 18, give the ball to Gore, even on 3rd and long. So it's interesting, because I felt last year, and see, I just want to get your thoughts on this, Ben, that in terms of the running game, I did think that Gore was going to get a bit of a break and some valuable rest time the way Kendall Hunter was playing.
Well,
because Kendall Hunter, I think, went in there, and at least he showed that he could be a capable backup, which the Niners have had a problem with backup running backs for years, ever since they started losing, for 10 years. The back, it's been Frank Gore, and that's basically it, because no one else has been any good. But he's still got a lot of work, even with Kendall Hunter taking some of the reps.
Well, I think.
Yeah, let's let Mike take this.
Yeah, go.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, Ben. Sorry.
Fine.
I think the reason why you see Brandon Jacobs come in, and you probably get to the point later on in the show about the Niners signing him, I think the fact of the matter, you really saw Frank Gore struggle at the goal line last year. Now, he's a guy that likes to run between the tackles, a physical back, but I think Brandon Jacobs is really going to, more than anything, help the 49ers on the goal line. And they became very, you cannot be predictable as an offense. And I think that's why they struggled so much in the red zone last year, is because you get down there and then hand the ball off to Gore, the ball off to Gore. And, this year coming up, I would like to see a little bit more play action down by the goal line, a little bit more creative down there for me, because they were just predictable inside the red zone. I think Brandon Jacobs is really going to help the 49ers on the goal line this year and help Frank Gore take less of a beating. So, Ben,
do you see that? I mean, would you be comfortable as a Niner fan with, Gore splitting the reps with Hunter and then giving the ball to Jacobs at the goal line?
Well, I don't think Jacobs is going to be exclusively a goal line back. No, not at all. And I think Hunter's probably going to get left behind a little bit.
Okay. Well, because my thing with that is, if you got, what you're saying about Hunter being left behind, I think, to me, I would like to see him still be a part of this, a big part of the running game, because, one, he's younger. I mean, Gore and Jacobs, both good running backs, but they're both getting up there.
Yeah, it's an interesting move.
And Hunter is a young guy. He can fill in and give the other guys some rest. And when you, like Mike said, the lifespan of an NFL running back is not long in terms of being efficient. And you being able to get the job done.
We've seen 3-back sets work in some in some fashions. I think the Giants were doing it. I think there's a couple more teams that have done it. And, I mean, I'm surprised because I don't remember seeing the 49ers do it. And if that's their plan and they've got a way to get all these players involved, then it makes sense. But to me, it wouldn't make sense to either leave Hunter or Gore behind or to make Jacobs an exclusive goal line back. They're all really good backs and should all be in there.
How do you see it, the running game being played out between those three?
Mitch?
How do I see it?
Yeah, how would you, let's put it this way, how would you as a fan like to see how the reps get split with these three running backs?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying Jacobs is going to be exclusively a goal line back, but he was a guy last year that you saw spells where he was on the bench a lot, and Bradshaw was getting a bulk of the carry. I don't even think he was really even an impact in the second half of that NFC title game against the 49ers. I think Jim Harbaugh has pieces to play with in that backfield now. I love Kendall Hunter. He's an awesome change-up back for the 49ers. He's got tremendous speed, and he's a tough kid. And I really think that, Ben pointed out, I think you're going to see some intense packages come in for the 49ers. I mean, we saw it last year, taking Sopalaga and Justin Smith and plugging them in on the offensive line as extra blockers. Jim likes to get creative when it comes to those packages. So I think that right now he does have options in that backfield, and the biggest key to me is how much does Brandon Jacobs have left?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
Will he be exclusively a goal line back? Will he get reps to spell Gore? Who knows at this point? It's all going to come down to how healthy he is, and number one, what he's got left. But I think Jim likes the fact of the matter that he's got three capable running backs right now in that backfield. And I just think that it's going to make Gore fresher come the end of the year next year because, I don't like to keep beating the drum, but Frank Gore, it just seemed to me he had no burst towards the end of the year. He was getting caught behind a lot in the open field. And, I just think it helps the team overall because it gives Frank a rest and will make him fresher come week 11 and week 16 and into the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be putting out a really good offensive team. I'm amazed that they were able to make the kind of signings that they did. We can let Frank Gore take some time to, not be the same back that he is now that we have Jacobs and Hunter there.
Right.
And then the offensive weapons now. I mean, this is looking like a much different team.
Let's talk about some of those offensive weapons that the Niners have added. Obviously, we switched to running back, but we were earlier in the show talking about the wide receiver position. As we all know, it's a huge need for the Niners. First thing they do to add to the wide receivers, they go out and sign Randy Moss to a one-year deal. Now, this is an interesting move, Ben. I mean, Randy Moss, obviously, long history in the league, very good with the Vikings, was not happy in Oakland, and it showed. Did not perform well with the Raiders. He had a pretty good season in New England, ended up getting cut by the Titans at one point. So he's kind of been up and down his whole career, but we all know when he's on, he's good. What did you think of the Randy Moss signing?
I think it's a risky move.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of upside there, and boy, Jim Harbaugh's kind of made a believer out of me. It's a little bit idyllic, but
He made a believer out of me when we won
naive.
6 straight games or whatever it was last year. That was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of the mindset. Well, geez, I mean, if anybody can work it out, it's Harbaugh.
Right.
Can bring Moss back to being a good player, but we'll see. And then I guess we're going to get around to the other wide receiver they brought in.
We will, but I want to get Mitch, your thoughts on Randy Moss. Do you see him as being able to be, like, say, a deep threat, which is something the Niners have lacked for a long time?
Yeah, I agree with Ben. I think time's only going to tell about Randy Moss. The 49ers front office, and me and you have talked about this before, Tom, on numerous occasions, remind me a lot of the San Francisco Giants front office. They're not making big splashes in free agency. They weren't going to go after, Vincent Jackson and pay him that big money that he got in Tampa Bay. So they went out and they signed a $36 6-year-old receiver with who is a diva and who has had nothing but problems in various places. And I think the key for Randy Moss is motivation. And that's very discomforting to say from a fan's perspective, because as an NFL player, you should be motivated on every snap, no matter what situation you're in. But they're going to be a winning ball club coming up in 2012, hopefully, even though their schedule's brutal. How motivated will Randy Moss be? Does he have a chip on his shoulder to prove that he still has something in the tank? I think that's where you look at the upside. I think that's where you begin to maybe assure yourself that Randy Moss will be productive, because of the fact of the matter that nobody really thinks he can anymore. The Manningham signing to me is a great signing. It's 2 years. He's a guy that moves the chains on third down. He makes nothing but big catches. His stats may not jump out at you and say, wow, this guy's a top-of-the-line receiver, but you have to also think in New York he was playing behind Jacob Cruz and Hakeem Nicks. So automatically he becomes one of the best options the 49ers have, and I think he's going to work the middle of the field. I think he's going to move the chains on third down. And I wouldn't be opposed to the 49ers maybe trading a Michael Crabtree at this point in time, because of the fact of the matter that I think they may go after a receiver in the draft. But, they look better on paper right now offensively at the wide receiver spot. But only time's going to tell how good Moss is going to be, how much he has left. But, I absolutely love the Manningham signing. And, so at least they went out and made some moves.
Yeah, well, Ben, Mike brought up a good point, is that, maybe now the Niners might end up waiving Michael Crabtree and going after someone in the draft. Do you think, for you, has the time run out on Michael Crabtree? Here's a guy who came in with such big hype, number 10 pick in the draft. We were all, so many Niner fans, including me, were very excited when the Raiders actually passed up on him and went for Haywood Bay, and the Niners got Crabtree coming out of Texas Tech. Hasn't shown up for training camp. So he hasn't really, gotten a rapport down with Alex Smith. Do you think it's time to let Crabtree? Do you think maybe it's time to let Crabtree go?
No. I think this is going to be the season that he emerges, or at least that he, the pieces are in place for it to happen. I think one of the toughest things you can do to a rookie, and some of them handle it well, but others don't, is to put him in a situation where they're all of a sudden a primetime player on a team that's not very good. And I think Crabtree, being a bit of a diva himself, and let's hope him and Randy Moss don't really go to their diva zone.
Can you imagine the two of them working together like that? Oh, my God.
Yeah, we can only hope for the best. But, I think there was a lot of pressure on Crabtree when he first arrived in the league to be a great player. And I think now that he's going to be the third receiver on this team with a lot of good running backs and maybe even a new quarterback, I think with the pressure off of him, he could kind of finally start to maybe put himself in his place and start being a good third receiver on a good team.
Okay, well, Mike, two-part question. One, would you be happy with with what the Niners have now at wide receiver? And also keep in mind they've lost Josh Morgan, but they added, so they added Moss, added Manningham, still have Crabtree. Would you like to see the Niners still go after more, add to the depth of wide receiver in the draft? Or should they be focusing on other areas? And second part, do you want to see Crabtree back?
You can never. I don't think you could have too much depth as the 49ers at the wide receiver spot after what we saw last season.
I'd agree with that.
Good point.
So yes, Alshon Jeffrey comes to mind. In the draft, he's a big prototype wide receiver, 6'3", 234 pounds. We'll probably get to the Niners and their draft plans here in a little bit, but yeah, I think going into camp, the more receivers you have and the more guys you have competing for that position, the better off you're going to be, because I want to see Michael Crabtree back, but I want to see Michael Crabtree begin to emerge for what they drafted him for.
Right.
And I think Michael Crabtree loses focus at times. I think Michael Crabtree runs his mouth too much at times. I think Michael Crabtree just quits at times. And, you can't have one catch in a title game. It's just not going to happen when you need to help this team in the worst way. And what they're going to do with him, they're probably going to keep him. He's probably going to be, their second or third option at this point. But I just, at this point in time, watching Michael Crabtree, I don't see him anything more than a possession receiver. I just don't see him as a big play guy. He's not going to be a big play guy. Can he move the chains on third down and make big catches when they need it? He didn't show that to me last year. So, I'm not going to sit here and say the sky's the limit with Michael Crabtree. I think that he needs to be more productive and accept his role for what it is. I think that's the problem with Michael Crabtree right now.
I'd agree with it. Yeah. Ben, let me ask this. As we get near the draft and all the teams and all the fans are preparing, mock drafts and getting ready to watch the draft, what's the one position besides wide receiver you'd like to see the Niners focus on with their first pick or some point during the draft?
Well, I was talking to another one of our newer junkies, John, on the phone the other day, and hadn't mentioned this yet, but he said they're looking at the Stanford tight end who was Andrew Luck's top target. And since they've lost Delaney Walker, I believe, I don't know if he left as a free agent or injured. What's that?
I didn't mean to cut you up, but I think Delaney Walker still do have him, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. I've been mistaken before, but go on.
I heard something came up with it. I'm not sure what it was, but I think if he goes and the Niners do run a lot of two tight end sets, then it might be a pretty good thing, If he's worked with Stanford before, then maybe that's Harbaugh's system.
I don't know if this is going to be, and we're running out of time here, but I don't know if this is going to be the main thing the Niners look for in the draft, but a big one now might also be right guard, because they have lost Adam Schneider. He signed with the Cardinals, so that might be another thing they look for in the draft. But that's the fun about the draft. You can make predictions, you can have ideas of what's going to happen, know what your team needs. And then but you never really know exactly what's going to happen until draft. And that's the fun of sports in general anyway.
One quick last thing. They also brought in quarterback Josh Johnson from the Bucs. So we might have a quarterback controversy to start the year.
That'll be fun. All right, and we got a lot more to talk about as draft day gets nearer right here on the Sports Junkies. We'll see you next time.